Sign the check, Claire. $25,000. Consider it the price for us tolerating you this long. My Uncle Silas didn't even look at me as he pointed a manicured finger at the auction block. He had just bid money he didn't have on a prize bull solely to feed his ego, and I was the designated wallet. Beside him, my cousin Beatrice shoved her phone in my face, the live stream counter ticking up. Look guys, she laughed, zooming in on my trembling hands. The family charity case is finally paying her dues. I stood frozen, the checkbook heavy in my hand, while the entire Texas elite watched me pay for a vanity project that would bankrupt me. Have you ever been forced to pay for someone else's ego? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. I signed my name. The ink looked black, but it felt like blood. $25,000. That was the down payment for my veterinary clinic. That was my freedom. Gone in a single second because Uncle Silas couldn't bear to lose a measuring contest with a neighbor. My name is Clara and I am 28 years old. I am a licensed doctor of veterinary medicine, top of my class, capable of performing complex surgery on a 2-ton animal. But in this family I am simply the spare part. The one they keep around to fix the messes the thoroughbreds leave behind. As I handed the check to the auction clerk, I saw Silas winking at his friends. He didn't even say thank you. He just snapped his fingers at me. Go check the trailer, Claire. Make sure my investment is comfortable. His investment. Bought with my money. You might wonder why I did it. Why I didn't just throw the pen in his face and walk away. It's a valid question. But abuse isn't a sudden explosion. It is a slow, methodical erosion. Psychologists call it the trap of normalized cruelty. It's when a family unit slowly desensitizes themselves to their own malice. It starts small. A forgotten birthday. A snide comment about my clothes. A demand to work on Christmas while they opened gifts. Over 20 years, they didn't just learn to treat me like a servant. They learned to believe it was the natural order of things. To Silas and Aunt Marion, hurting me isn't cruelty. It's just how the world works. I am the resource. They are the consumers. You don't thank a hammer for driving a nail, and you don't thank Clara for draining her life savings to save the family name. They had successfully trained me to participate in my own destruction. I had spent my entire life trying to buy my way into their hearts with labor, with obedience, and now with actual cash. I walked out to the loading dock. The night air was thick with the smell of diesel and manure. Inside the luxury viewing box above me I could see them. Silas was popping a bottle of expensive champagne. Beatrice was posing for selfies, the flash illuminating her perfect teeth. They were celebrating a victory they hadn't earned, paid for by a woman they didn't respect. I opened the trailer latch. The bull snorted, a massive heaving beast of muscle and instinct. He was scared. He was trapped. I reached out and touched his flank, feeling the heat radiating off him. We were the same, him and I. Prized possessions to be used until we broke. But as I stood there in the dark, listening to the distant laughter of my family, the fear in my chest began to cool. It hardened into something heavy and cold. They thought I was just a checkbook. They thought I would always be the quiet, grateful orphan. They were about to find out that even a domesticated animal will bite if you corner it long enough. The ride back to the ranch was silent, save for the hum of the tires on the asphalt. I sat in the back of the truck watching the fence posts blur by, while Silas and Marion sat up front, already discussing where to place the new bull's trophy in the den. When we walked into the main house, the air conditioning hit me like a slap, freezing the sweat on my skin. I tried to slip away to my room, the small guest quarters off the kitchen that had been my designated space for 20 years, but Marion's voice stopped me cold. Don't you dare walk away with that sour look on your face, Clara. You should be proud. Tonight you actually did something useful for this family. She stood there, slipping off her diamond earrings, looking at me with pure disdain. Silas poured himself a scotch, nodding in agreement. Your aunt is right. You moped through the entire transaction. It was embarrassing. If you're going to contribute, do it with a smile. We put a roof over your head. We gave you a purpose. I stood there, gripping the strap of my bag until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that they hadn't given me a purpose. They had given me a sentence. But the words died in my throat. This is the invisible chain of the survivor. It's a psychological mechanism that keeps you tethered to your abusers long after you have the strength to leave. You learn early on that fighting back only tightens the noose. You learn that silence is safety. You convince yourself that if you just endure one more indignity, one more payment, one more insult, maybe they will finally let you be. It is a prison without bars, built entirely out of the hope that if you are good enough they will stop hurting you. Well, Silas barked, ice clinking in his glass. Are you going to apologize for your attitude? She doesn't need to apologize. The voice came from the hallway, quiet but sharp enough to cut through the tension like a razor. We all turned. Standing there was my grandmother, Eleanor. For the last decade she had been a ghost in this house. Frail, retired, mostly confined to her wing, letting Silas run the show while she faded into the background. But the woman standing there now wasn't a ghost. She was the matriarch who had built this empire from dirt and grit before Silas was even born. She walked into the room, leaning heavily on her cane, but her eyes were burning with a clarity I hadn't seen in years. She didn't look at me. She looked straight at her son. Mother, Silas stammered, putting his drink down. You should be in bed. It's late. I saw the live stream, Eleanor said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. Beatrice's video. I watched my son force my granddaughter to pay for his vanity project while his daughter mocked her poverty. It was just a joke, Mother, Marian interjected, her nervous laugh shrill. We were just having fun. Clara knows we love her. Do you? Eleanor stepped closer. Because it looked a lot like you were robbing her. Give me the receipt, Silas. Now hold on, Silas bristled, trying to regain his authority. This is business. I made a command decision for the good of the ranch. Clara's contribution is perfectly. I said give me the receipt. Eleanor didn't raise her voice. She simply issued an order and the heir left the room. Silas, a 50-year-old man who bullied everyone in his path, looked suddenly like a caught child. He pulled the carbon copy of my check from his pocket and handed it to her. Eleanor looked at it, then tore it into 4 precise pieces. She let them flutter to the floor. That check is cancelled, she stated. And as of this moment, so is your authority. I am dissolving the family trust, Silas. I am taking back executive control of this ranch. Effective immediately. You can't do that. Silas shouted, his face turning purple. I've run this place for 10 years. You haven't run it, Eleanor corrected, her gaze cold as winter. You've bled it dry. And you used Clara to hold the bandage. Get out of my sight. All of you. I need to speak with my granddaughter alone. Eleanor didn't say a word as she led me down the long oak-paneled hallway to her study. She walked slowly, each step a negotiation with gravity, but her spine was as rigid as a steel beam. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with the dust of 20 years of things left unsaid. When she closed the heavy double doors, locking out the sounds of Silas's tantrums, the mask finally slipped. She slumped into her leather chair, her breath catching in a ragged wheeze. She looked small suddenly, fragile. Pour us a drink, Clara, she whispered. The good stuff. We're going to need it. I poured 2 glasses of the whiskey she kept for special occasions. My hand was still shaking, not from fear anymore but from the adrenaline of seeing the giants of my childhood reduced to scolding children. I handed her the glass. Why now? I asked. It was the only question that mattered. You've watched them treat me like a servant for a decade. You watched them mock me. Why tonight? Eleanor took a sip, her eyes closing briefly. Because I have a deadline, Clara. I have pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The world tilted on its axis. The woman who was the bedrock of this ranch, the only person who had ever looked at me with anything other than utility, was leaving. Don't look at me like that, she snapped, though her voice was gentle. I'm 82. Death isn't a tragedy, it's a schedule change. But it means I don't have time for patience anymore. This is the Guardian's silent regret. We like to think of our saviors as all-knowing, but sometimes they are just flawed humans paralyzed by hope. Eleanor looked at me and I saw the guilt etched into her wrinkles. She had spent years hoping her son would grow a conscience, hoping that if she gave him enough rope he would build a ladder instead of a noose. She had sacrificed my happiness on the altar of her maternal optimism. She had waited for a redemption that was never coming, and now, facing the end, she realized she had simply allowed the rot to spread. I thought I was protecting the peace, she admitted, her voice thick with regret. I was just protecting their cruelty. But we are done with peace. She opened the drawer of her desk and pulled out a single thin file. Silas didn't just bully you into paying for that bowl tonight, Clara. He stole from you to do it. I know, I said. I paid the check. No. She slid the file across the desk. I mean before tonight. Your parents, my daughter and your father, they left you a trust. It wasn't money, it was land. 300 acres of prime grazing land on the North Ridge. It was supposed to be your start. I opened the file. It was a deed of sale. Dated 5 years ago. Signed by Silas as the executor. He sold it. The air left my lungs. He sold my parents' legacy? He sold it to a developer, Eleanor confirmed, her eyes hard as flint. He used the money to renovate the main house and buy Beatrice that sports car. He liquidated your future to pay for his present. The rage that hit me then wasn't hot. It was absolute zero. It froze my tears before they could fall. They hadn't just been mean. They had been thieves. They had looked at a grieving orphan and seen a bank account to be raided. But that's not the worst of it, Eleanor said softly. The bull. The one he made you buy tonight. What about it? Look at the pedigree. I looked at the auction sheet tucked into the file. I traced the lineage back. The sire. The grandsire. And then I saw it. The name of the foundation sire. Obsidian King. That was your father's bull, Eleanor said. Your father spent 10 years breeding that line. He built it from nothing. It was his pride and joy. Silas didn't just force you to pay for a random animal, Clara. He made you buy back your own father's legacy with money you earned fixing the animals he breaks. It was a cruelty so specific, so tailored, it took my breath away. Silas knew. He knew exactly what that bloodline meant. He had taken my money, my land, and now he was mocking my dead father's memory for sport. I stood up. The glass in my hand felt heavy like a weapon. What do we do? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. Sounded like hers. Eleanor smiled, and it was a terrifying thing to witness. We don't do anything, my dear. We let them think they're fighting a war for money. They don't realize they're fighting a war for survival. Tomorrow morning I'm calling my lawyers. By noon, Silas won't just be out of a job. He'll be answering for every acre he stole. The cease and desist letters arrived at 8 the next morning. By 8:05 every family credit card was dead. By 9 they finally understood that their 20-year money flow had been shut off. Most families would panic or apologize. Mine declared war. Knowing Eleanor's paperwork was airtight, they abandoned court and turned to the one arena where truth is optional: public opinion. Beatrice led the attack. Instead of ranting online, she appeared on the biggest agricultural podcast in Texas, painting me as unstable and accusing me of manipulating a dying woman and committing elder abuse. It was flawless gaslighting. She made herself the savior and me the villain. Within hours, my clinic page filled with fake one-star reviews and outrageous claims. My career was being burned down before it began. I broke, wanting to hide or bargain. Eleanor refused. If you feed a shark, it just brings friends. She reminded me that without her, Silas would have erased me, empty my accounts, sell the ranch, and bury my future. This fight was not about winning an argument. It was survival. We did not answer the lies. We waited. At the Austin Cattle Barons Gala, Beatrice basked in attention, until Eleanor gave the signal. The tribute video cut to bank transfers, trust withdrawals, yacht bills, and Paris trips, all paid with stolen funds. The crowd gasped. Beatrice, still holding a live mic, shrieked that my father was never real family, and they deserved the money. Her words, broadcast to the entire ballroom, destroyed them faster than any lawyer. Indictments followed for fraud and elder abuse. They lost the house, their status, and their freedom. Beatrice's rant went viral. She lost her sponsors, her image, and her fiancé. Eleanor died 3 months later, mission complete. I inherited the ranch, sold Silas's vanity bulls, and founded the Eleanor Veterinary Clinic, built on the very land they tried to steal. I created a scholarship fund for rural students like me, kids with talent but no pedigree. That is planter's justice. True revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. Take what they used to break you and use it to build something better. Yesterday, I watched a scholarship student nervously examine her first pregnant heifer. I told her what no one ever told me: you belong here. The land finally sounded like peace, not fear. Clara didn't just survive the war. He changed the future.